let's go to our third room. Let's see, is it that one? Yes, okay. And let's just set up a couple of robots to appear in there. I won't do random. And I'll just have just 2 robots. Oh, that's because I changed the wrong value. Um, it goes right here for a specific enemy, like the way we set up. So now we'll have 2 robots appear, and this is going to be our first combat test. So we want to set it up so when we move our alien into this room, if he's in combat, he can't leave until combat is resolved. So let's make that our next step. Okay, our select object is what moves our character. So we can start to close out a lot of these that we won't be using for a little bit. Okay. So we need to come up with some kind of system to say if we are in combat or not. So let's think about what scripts we're going to need for this. This is the script that moves our character. So we're going to need that. Now, what script spawns our enemies? Well, we have our enemy spawn manager here. So let's check this out. So here's our method here to spawn random enemies or set enemies, right? So why don't we create like a public bool say like is combat, and we could do this as false. And in here where we spawn our enemies, if enemies are being spawned, then we are in combat, right? Now that's not the case because our enemies appear right away at start. So we want it so it's when we get into the room if there's an enemy, right? So how can we detect this? That's what we have to think about. When we get into this room, how do we create a check to see if there are enemies in this room? So maybe instead of is combat, we can say has enemies. So now that script, which is on our room preferences here, each room is going to have a different one. So that one says, yeah, we have enemies. But this one here, did we spawn anything? We didn't, but look, we still have enemies. Let's look at our first room. We still have enemies. Because even though we said don't spawn anything, we still ran that in that method. So let's go back and revise this. Number of enemies to spawn. So maybe we put something in here that says if number of enemies to spawn is greater than 0, then we have enemies in this room. Now we're going to get something more accurate. And see how we just kind of do this one step at a time. We're just building this as we go. You're not always going to create like the perfect code your first time around. Like you're going to, throw something in, doesn't work, and then you revise it and you figure out what parameters you need, figure out what conditions you need as you go, and then make sure it works. So now, our next step, where are we now? We have a condition that says if there's an enemy or not in the room. Okay, but my alien goes to that room, and he can just go nope and leave. So now we need to say, hey, check this variable, and if it's true, you can't go anywhere. And what controls that? Our select object script. So we're going to have to connect these two with some type of reference to lock our player's movement. And here we can do a private bool, and if we need to make it public we can, but what we'll do is combat, or I'd rather say is in combat. And basically we need to say if you're in combat you can't move. So let's just check exactly what our code does here. So our click object selects an object, controls our animation, checks if the room is locked, if the room is not locked, it sets the animation to 3, sets it so our player moves. So it sounds like we don't even want it so you can click on other rooms. So if is in combat, and let's put an exclamation point here, which makes this a false statement. So if we are not in combat, so if is in combat is false, then we can click our objects. And just like we have here where we make this reference to check the room lock manager, we want to do a reference to check the enemy spawn manager. So let's see if we click an object and let's say that room has enemies. And we got to make sure we're clicking on a room that is unlocked too. So if room lock is locked is false, so maybe we should put it here. We'll start moving over there. And then we'll say, we don't want to set that true yet. We want to get a reference our reference is going to be to the enemy spawn manager, and we'll just say enemy spawn check. Oh, this might, oh, I didn't make a reference up here, that's why. Yeah, see how we have a reference up here. Okay. And then we'll say if if has enemies is true, then is in combat is equal to true, or equals true. Now we're also going to have to come up with something to no longer be in combat. And that's something we're going to have to trigger once our enemies are killed. And we'll have to do a check to make sure all the enemies are killed and not just like one of them out of 2 or one of them out of 3. So now I'm clicking on these other rooms and I can't leave. So that's what we want. We came in and now we are stuck in this combat in this room. So in order for us to be in combat with these enemies, they're going to need stats of their own, which we have not set up yet. So you'll have to find the prefab for your enemies. I have mine right here. And I'm going to add in my enemy stats. And I believe we had stats set up for their weapons and armor as well in our document that we wrote. So we can reuse this same script here. And we can just create something that says like is player, and if not, then it is an enemy. And then down here we'll say if player, then we do all that. Else, it's our enemy, so we want to set this up for our enemy stats. I'm just going to copy this in and replace the parts that I need to replace. And I'm going to read through this. So will this work? Probably not, because what this is going to do is it's going to find, um, it's going to look for the first game object with the tag enemy. And what happens if we have multiple enemies? Well, we could check. So I'll open all these back up. It's just like our player. Our enemy's going to have the same stats, but he's not going to get critical hits, because I don't think that would be very fair. Actually, it would be fair, but we want our player to have an advantage. So we've got basically identical scripts outside of our luck here. And we probably could have used the same, like a master stats, but that's okay, because we might be changing these in the future to be a little bit different. So just like we did here, I'm going to do the same thing over on the armor side. So there we go. Else. Okay. So let's see what happens if we're just looking for a random enemy, or just an enemy with the enemy script. So first, let's go to our robots. We're going to make sure the tag is enemy. Okay. So now he has the enemy tag. My robot does not have a weapon. So I'm going to give him one. I'm going to give him a laser pistol. And I'm going to try to figure out which arm that is. Okay. So he will have a laser pistol in his back arm there. Okay. I'm going to put it under his arm for the hierarchy. And so he can attack. Looks like he's just smacking with the gun. That's okay. We'll set that up later. But he's got an attack animation. And then for his body, we want to put on that armor script. And we'll say robots are, really resistant to damage and, not to the special, whatever that may be. And so that has the stats there. And then under the alien, I just want to set this to isPlayer. And then do that on the body as well. And I'm going to hit play real quick. And we're going to see if these robots have their stats changed. And they do. Now, why did that work? Because game object, find game object with tag enemy, you would think it would just try to find any enemy, like the first enemy it could find. Boom, there's the first one I could find. It's got the enemy tag. I should target that. But it doesn't work that way. And this is what's kind of cool about this, is I can click on it. And look, it looks for the tag within itself before it goes out to other game objects. So even though I said just find a tag with enemy and then target that, it goes, let me check my hierarchy. Let me work my way up the hierarchy before I jump over to this main hierarchy and pick the wrong robot. So just for an example, let's go back into this room here, and we're going to spawn all 5 robots. And if what I said is true, then all 5 robots, their armor should be pointing at themselves. And if what I said is not true, then they're going to be pointing at different robots. So he's pointing at himself. His armor is pointing at the correct one. His is correct. His is correct. And his is correct. So although, we're saying just find game object with tag enemy, it checks its hierarchy first before it jumps out to a different game object outside of the hierarchy. So this is perfectly fine to use. And now we have robots with different types of armor, and they had guns. I don't know where their guns went. It's a little odd looking. Yeah, that's definitely odd looking there. I wonder if that's part of our problem. Zero that out. Okay. Let's shrink it down. Reposition it. There we go. Cool. Let's try it again. There it is. Awesome. Left lower arm, right there. So it was showing up. I think I checked the left upper arm. But it was the Z positioning was like way back there. So that's why I didn't see it. So now we have our enemies with um, their own weapons that can be brought in. And we could even have some that, like, we could create a separate prefab, like robot with gun or robot with nothing. And they could just have, like, no pistol and just, you know, we could just have it go by, like, a base stat where, like, they do, like, 5 damage or something. So however you want to do it. So I'm going to give these guys their own little red gun. I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to make sure it's not in the wrong Z position. Shrink it down. And I'm going to get rid of this one. So now they're going to have this little red gun. Because I don't want them to do as much damage to the player. Because they are outnumbering my player. And right now I don't have other players in the group. So unlike Fallout Shelter, in Fallout Shelter they have like a small group. Like I think you have 3 characters usually, and they go through each room and they fight. For this game, I'm gonna just do my one for now, and in the future we could add more in. But just for the purposes of this tutorial, we're gonna stick with just one player character in this dungeon, if you want to call it that, this environment. And what I did not do, which we should have done, so I have my 2D characters here. I have a weapons folder. I'm going to put the gun red in there and make a prefab out of these weapons. That way I can make universal changes if I need to. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is create just a little health bar meter above their heads, just to track how much health they have.